Accidental Marriage by Shadina. Chapter 8. There were certain things that Ed loved. He loved his brother, he loved adventure, he loved those hot little pastries that you never knew what was in the middle of them until you bite into them. Then there were things he obsessed about, such as alchemy, learning, and trying to gain that elusive inch in height so he could reach the second to the top shelf in the library. The top ones he never bothered with. Why should he? They're so high up there. What use could they possibly have for a normal person other than gathering dust? No, important books were where people could actually reach them. Then there were things that Ed hated, loathed even. Homunculi, milk, a Mustang. Separate, Ed knew how to handle each thing. He knew how to react and how the object would as well. However, Ed's poor mind was melting at this situation. He was currently trying to analyze how to handle such a unique situation. At one time, he was dealing with something he loved, something he obsessed with, and something he loathed, and he just wasn't sure how he was supposed to react. He looked at the dark-haired man reflection in the glass, trying to figure out what he was trying to pull exactly. Was it a trick of some sort? Had to be. There was no way the flame alchemist would come to such a place willingly. Just wasn't possible. It was against his nature. A brightly colored object drew his attention from the reflection back to what the glass was actually separating him from. Rather interesting, brightly colored fish. Out of everything Ed had seen and been to, he'd never been to an aquarium, he believed Roy called it. It was fascinating seeing all the different sea life and reading up on them and their habitat. He wished his brother was here to see this and read all the interesting facts with him. However, he was stuck with the jerk that was standing a few feet behind him. The thought drew his gold eyes back to the reflection of his only displeasure about all this. That one man. Just looking at him could make his blood boil. Now a little different, which frustrated him to no end and made him hate him all the more. Ed hated not understanding things. Such as why they were here in the first place. Colonel Bastard had suggested it, well, more like informed him. He didn't know what it was at first, which apparently amused the jerk. Not his fault he didn't know, not like there were very many of them. The colonel proceeded to explain it to him while he was being led to the aquarium. Why in the world would a fire alchemist want to be surrounded by so much water? Or, a better question, why in the world would he have been willing to walk through the rain for this? Of course, the rain had lightened a great deal over the course of a few days, but it was still raining. Wouldn't Roy want to hide inside for a day or two more and wait for it to stop raining instead? He really didn't understand this. It messed with his head. He watched as Roy moved to another tank to examine the contents in there. Ed was trying to watch him in case he should try something suspicious. Not that this whole thing wasn't suspicious. However, he was finding it a bit difficult with the interesting creatures on display for him and the information provided to him for each unique creature. Roy, on the other hand, was really just able to relax and enjoy everything around him. It was very cool inside the aquarium, and was fun to watch the different sea life swim around. What was more enjoyable, though, was watching Ed. He had always felt the boys needed to be boys more often than they were allotted. So he tried to think of something he thought Ed would enjoy, even if it was just the two of them. He had waited until it wasn't storming outside, and pretty safe to walk outside, for them to go. He was a bit worried, though, with Ed's explosive temper if the tanks would survive the blonde's visit, but they seemed to be doing just fine, really. He turned and looked at Ed. His eyes were a bit wider, his mouth was open just a bit, and just about everything in the building had his fingerprints on it. Roy felt he had made a good decision to bring the boy here. Staring at a tank full of jellyfish, Ed was suddenly next to him. It surprised Roy, but he didn't outwardly express it, keeping his eyes focused on the odd purple umbrella-like things. His eyes moved slowly over the pouting boy next to him. Only when their eyes met did Ed say something. "Just what are you trying to pull here?" he asked, crossing his arms over his chest, his feet shoulder-width apart. Roy looked at the boy, amused.
"Pull? What makes you think I'm trying to pull anything?"
he asked. Ed frowned, irritated. "You're always trying to. You've always got a scheme going on, and somehow I tend to find myself in the middle of them." Roy unlocked his eyes from the golden ones and turned back to the jellyfish.
"I just thought it would be fun, Full Metal," he said. "Sometimes you have to take a time out from things and simply enjoy something."
"And so you brought me why, then? You could have done all this yourself."
"Are you saying you don't like it here?"
he asked like he was hurt. He then sighed, knowing he really didn't want to set it off in such a fragile place.
"I suppose I am really using you. I'm an extrovert,"
he explained.
"I need to be around people. I can't find the enjoyment of doing something alone, so I take others along."
Ed blinked. That actually made sense. He could see Roy as an extrovert. He never really understood the nature himself, but he could certainly see Roy as being one. He made a noise from his throat. He could live with that, though, right? There was no grand evil scheme involved here, just Roy wanting company. That wasn't a horrible thing. Well, the fact that he was that chosen company could be classified as horrible, but the aquarium was so amazing he didn't actually mind being the company then. Next time he would be given the chance to go to one of these with Al, he would. For now, though, he'd just enjoy this one. Since Ed didn't say anything, Roy figured it meant that he was okay with it. It would be a shame to have to leave early. The entrance fee had cost him more than he had anticipated. He walked through in a comfortable silence, occasionally getting one another's attention to look at a specific exhibit. All in all, it was fun, and it was the first time they were really able to interact with one another. They both found that when they weren't trying to get on each other's nerves, they were actually okay. They got to the end of the whole underwater adventure. Ed looked outside and grinned childishly. It had stopped raining, something he was very pleased about. Even Ed didn't like rain all that much. It stopped him from doing a lot. He looked behind him, his hands on his hips, and grin plastered on his face. "It stopped raining," he announced. Roy walked up beside him and nodded his head.
"So it has,"
he agreed.
"We should take this opportunity and leave then,"
he said as he stepped out of the building. The sky was still cloudy, but it looked like it was lightening up. This, of course, made both alchemists very pleased. Ed quickened his pace to catch up with the dark-haired man. They walked along the beach in relatively comfortable silence. Not a word was being spoken between them as they enjoyed the breeze floating off the sea, giving off a light salty smell that is of course normally associated with such places. The sand gave in under feet in small depressions, though it was safe from the lapping waves that seemed keen on trying to get to their heels, but never making it. Ed turned his head from the white and blue ocean water to what was ahead of him when he heard just as salty notes interweaving with the wind. A deep-set frown took over his features as he stared ahead. Roy, being as observant as always, didn't miss the deep-set frown that had etched its way onto Edward's features. The obvious annoyance that just sort of randomly appeared made him look around at things other than Ocean and the golden-haired youth next to him. He looked where Ed's eyes were diverted and saw a small group, 3 men strong. Their eyes squinted so they looked closed as salt-seasoned voices rumbled from their bellies. It caused Roy to blink, wondering what in the world they could have done that seemed to put Ed in such a sour mood. Surely a few men enjoying each other's companionship as they head for the bar wasn't something to be upset about. It must be missing something important. Ed just kept staring at them as if trying to decide whether or not to act on his murderous intent. The men seemed to react to Ed's darkened aura with joy.
Lottie boy!
Did they know each other? And if so, when did Ed have time to meet people? Oh, wait a minute. Roy frowned when he remembered the other day when Ed came back drunk. Did he meet them then? The tall redhead put an arm around Ed's shoulder and leaned heavily, but Ed stood firmly rooted like a tree, very stiff, and his hands fisted at his side. The redhead hardly seemed to notice the boiling temper he was hugging onto. If the redhead died, he didn't know anything.
"Who's this? A friend?"
The shortest bald man asked and put a hard pat on the back. He might as well have just shoved him. It caused Roy to lose his footing for a moment. "No, that's—" Roy cut Edward off.
"Roy Mustang. Edward and I were just—"
Now Roy was cut off by the bald man who apparently thought he was tough.
"That's great. More to marry him, right?"
How the 3 men managed to move a resistant Roy and Edward Mustang, neither of them would ever figure out, but move them they did. The 3 men chattered and sang, including them in as if they wanted to be there, which was certainly not the case. It wasn't long before they found themselves in the bar that Ed was in just the other night. The bar looked like any other bar Roy had seen in his life, aside from the fact fishing was without a doubt the theme here. He was pulled along with Ed and the 3 men and seated on a well-worn chair. The polish was long since gone on the seat, back, and the ring around the legs. Ed huffed as he was sat down next to Roy. It did make him feel a bit better that Roy was there this time at least. Then he couldn't get mad at him for any reason, right? "What's the occasion this time?" Ed asked, annoyed. The tall, annoying guy, Larry, was it? He grinned brightly, showing off his yellow teeth, not that he seemed to care.
"The ending of the storm."
Storm? That must have been where Ed got that excuse. The fact that these 3 were the ones responsible for getting Ed drunk made a firm decision in Roy's mind. It was time to leave. He stood up.
"It was a pleasure meeting you, gentlemen, but we really have some other place to be."
Brass, the seeming leader of the group, pushed down on Roy's shoulder, forcing Roy to sit back down.
We're just getting started, though. Since your new friend, it'll be on us.
Well, Roy couldn't very well be so rude as to refuse their offering of friendship, now could he? A few drinks wouldn't hurt.
That's very kind of you. I suppose we have some time to spare.
He missed Ed, rolling his eyes at him. A small glass was pressed in Roy's hands and one in Ed's, but Roy took Ed's as well and downed it. Ed didn't mind. He had no intention of suffering like he had the other day. He learned his lesson and was never going to drink again. Roy, on the other hand, had no problem taking as many drinks as the men would pay for, leaving Ed to draw on the counter with his finger. Eventually, Ed just got tired of waiting, and the loud, tuneless sounds they were making was giving him a headache. He got up, ready to walk out without Roy. Roy saw Ed get up and quickly followed after him. The three men didn't even notice them leave as they continued with their joyous celebrating. Roy fell in step with Ed, almost second nature to do so, after being in the military for so long. It would just be odd to walk out of sync with someone.
Nice group of men,
he said with a grin. Ed rolled his eyes. You only say that because you left them with the tab. Roy closed his eyes, seemingly amused by something.
Perhaps, though now I understand why you came back drunk.
Ed gave him an odd look. I told you there was a storm, he reminded him. Roy snorted lightly.
That's not a reason the average person drinks, Full Metal. For them, it's simply an excuse. It's not a reason, though.
He repeated to make sure Ed understood him. The look on the blonde's face was one of irritation. He'd been tricked? He thought he was proving himself to Roy when he repeated the storm thing. Now he finds out he just sounded like an idiot and even more of a child. Ed frowned. How come you're not drunk? He asked suddenly. Roy looked at Ed amused.
I am.
He paused.
I'm just a better drunk than you are.
That caused Ed to turn red and off. Well, I'm not helping you with your hangover, he informed him steelily. Roy chuckled.
Of course not.
I'm not, he pressed.
I realize that.
You can suffer by yourself.
So I gathered.
I'm not going to help you at all.
You've said that already.
Roy wondered just what he was trying to prove by repeating himself. Just wanted to make sure you understood, bastard.
Colonel Bastard,
Roy corrected him. It wasn't much longer before they were back up in their hotel room. Ed finally realized how drunk Roy was when it came to stairs. Apparently, drunk Roy didn't like stairs. Ed had to make sure he didn't fall down them. Though he did entertain the thought of letting Roy fall and smash his head in, it would get him out of the marriage. Unfortunately, no matter how many close calls there were, he didn't fall back. Jerky can't do anything right. Maybe if he'd just die already, then this entire mess would be fixed. They got to the room, and Roy made a beeline for the foam by the bed. He ordered some wine. Ed frowned. Haven't you had enough to drink? Roy looked over his shoulder at him.
Wine is the best thing to drink when you're drunk,
he said.
Helps put you to sleep so you can sleep it off.
Ed blinked. He'd have to just take his word for it, but that didn't sound right. Whatever, bastard.
Colonel Bastard.
Sure, bastard.
Colonel Bastard.
I know that, bastard.
Colonel Bastard.
Bastard! His response was interrupted by a knock at the door. A young man with very short, light blonde hair was there holding a bottle of vintage red wine, and 2 glasses, even though Roy never specified how many glasses he wanted. The man wore something you'd expect a waiter to wear. Perhaps that's what he was. A white dress shirt with arm cuffs, a black bow tie, slacks, and smock. Roy took the glasses and the bottle and thanked the man, then closed the door behind himself. He settled himself on the couch with his bottle of wine and 2 glasses, though he only planned on using one. With a snap of his fingers, he lit the fireplace again. It was a good thing he had practiced doing it and didn't manage to burn anything else down with it. He uncorked the wine bottle and poured the red liquid into the glass. He swirled the contents around a bit, smelled it, and took a taste. Gold Eyes watched with interest as the colonel settled down to enjoy the red wine and fire. He wondered what it tasted like. Did it burn your throat the way bourbon did? Or perhaps it tasted good. Roy seemed to be enjoying it, savoring it, really. He licked his lips curiously. Maybe he could sneak a taste. After all, a sip wouldn't get him sick now, would it? He climbed out of the bed and went towards Roy. His dark eyes were closed, blocking out the world, so Ed quietly moved to get the bottle. However, Roy's hand caught him as he lifted the bottle up.
You're not old enough,
Roy said. Ed's face got red in anger. I am too. I'm a state alchemist, and it's not like I want to drink it. I just want to try a sip. Ed glared and watched the man take another sip from his glass. He lowered the glass onto the ground and pulled Edward to him closely so he was sitting on him.
Without warning, Roy clamped his lips over Ed's, causing the golden eyes to widen and for him to stiffen as if starched. He felt Roy's tongue probe his mouth, and he opened it. Warm liquid passed through from Roy's mouth into his own, and Ed swallowed, not even taking the time to examine it, instead focusing on the warm, wet organ now in his mouth. Was Roy kissing him? He felt a warm hand move up under his shirt, kissing and touching him. He hummed a bit into Roy's mouth, finally closing his eyes and giving in. He had been curious since the morning he woke up with a hangover and remembered molesting Roy, and honestly he'd wanted to do it again, but that's it wrong to be thinking such things. He wrapped his arms around Roy's neck to encourage him, not that Roy needed encouragement. His buzzed mind only knew that the body wasn't struggling, so it was okay to continue. Roy pulled away from his lips and started to kiss and nip at his jaw as he lowered Ed onto his back on the couch. Ed let him do it, looking up at him half-lidded, wanting. Ed saw Roy lean down for another kiss and closed his eyes to accept it. Unfortunately, the drunk bastard missed completely. Ed didn't move for a bit, and neither did the man on top of him. He heard a loud snore coming from his partner and frowned. Damn bastard fell asleep on him.